Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video, and I've been requested very frequently on my stream to make a prediction for where I'm anticipating the specializations to land in terms of power on Tuesday, considering the massive wave of class tuning that has basically been announced for this weekend coming into next week, and I'll have that video linked at the end of this one. And if you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft and educational and entertaining content, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. Now, I think the best way to start off with this tier list, given the chaos that is ensuing, is to look at specializations that basically received the least amount of changes that we know have a solid position. So one of those specializations, and this tier list is for solo shuffle in particular as well, is Beast Mastery Hunter. I'm slapping this bad boy up onto the Godlike tier. Beast Mastery Hunter basically didn't get touched. When we look at it, they basically buffed a little bit of your Dark Ranger build, but didn't get touched basically at all. Aside from that, and because of that, I think with the pack leader build that I've been trying, this thing does an impressive amount of damage. It is actually terrifying how powerful and how easy it is to pull off, and the fact that it didn't get really any attention at all with this round of tuning makes me anticipate that it'll be one of the strongest specs, and it will likely have implications on the power of other specs almost regardless of the tuning involved with those ones. Now, the next specialization that received like the least amount of tuning, right, or very, very minimum amount of tuning, what would that be? Like Fury Warrior probably would be my best bet. And I've got the changes open here as well because there are so many that I don't want to miss something while we're reviewing this, but I'm pretty sure Fury Warrior received basically next to nothing. And Fury Warrior was already really strong. I think Fury Warrior is one of the most powerful solo shuffle specializations. I'm slapping this up onto S tier only because I think it does have some limitations. Unlike Beastmaster, I think it's universally just really good in all situations. Fury Warrior can be kited for the most part, but it's a monster, man. Almost every global cooldown you use on this spec hits for like 1.5 million to 3 million damage. It's actually disgusting the position that it's in at the moment when it comes to solo shuffle. Really powerful considering it's not really getting any changes. And the specs that it is weak to, things like Mage, received for the most part nerfs. I think that it's likely going to still remain in a really strong position. Next specialization that we should talk about here is probably Shadow Priest, because Shadow Priest got basically a slap on the wrist. I think they got like a 3% damage reduction or something like that, and then that was it. If that was even the case, it might have just literally been nothing for Shadow. So yeah, Shadow is definitely going to still be a powerhouse. I'm looking at the PvP section, that's why there wasn't anything. It was 8 here. Yeah, 3% damage, very minimal slap on the wrist, and it was already, I think in my opinion, kind of in the Godlike tier. Is it as good as Beast Mastery Hunter? I really think with Psyfiend, with the amount of burst damage you can do, with how tanky you are, I think in particular things like the damage reduction from using Flash Heal make you really strong. So if you get kicked on Shadow, you can Flash Heal yourself, and Desperate Prayer in an emergency, and you get like this really durable build with how much damage reduction you have in Shadow form, plus the Flash Heal makes you really tanky. So I'm gonna slap it up on the Godlike for now. I think it's just universally really good. Considering there were nerfs to Windwalker Monk as well, which was one of your counters. Fury Warrior is still rough to deal with as Shadow, but I think there's other casters that have a harder time. I think that it's more fair to also have a delineation, because otherwise I'd have a whole bunch of specs on S. So I think these ones are definitely coming out like a little bit of a cut ahead. Affliction Warlock, you kind of have counters, and these two that are already on the tier are your main counters, Fury Warrior and Beast Mastery Hunter. Death Knight is getting some changes that could definitely make Unholy with Soul Reaper a lot more menacing, and you don't like that. You don't like Death Knights and Demon Hunters and Fury Warriors. Those are going to be all really hard to deal with. Arms Warrior is also getting significantly stronger. Arms Warrior is getting some of the biggest buffs, and that's one of your direct counters. So yeah, I'm a bit worried about it just getting kind of absolutely destroyed by changes like this. So Affliction Warlock, do I want to be conservative with this one? I've been playing it myself. It feels much easier to shut down than I was really anticipating. And they did actually nerf your set bonus, but maybe my personal bias is because I don't have the 4-piece yet. Maybe with the 4-piece it actually does get significantly better. But from what I've noticed, these specs can be really hard to deal with. It's hard to do damage in Shadow Priest. It's hard. So for me, I'm giving it a little bit of a lower ranking for Shuffle. I do think the melee enhancements to DK, Demon Hunter's prevalence already starting to grow a bit. I think it could be difficult for Affliction. just due to the nature of the meta. Not so much that it's even really gotten weaker, but I think that with where the meta is shifting, that you'll see more counters, and it'll be much more difficult to succeed. Now, Boomkin got a lot of buffs. It got Frenzied Regen buffs, which are going to help its durability, which definitely was like the main issue with it. But it's also getting a lot of damage buffs. I think the Moonfire and Sunfire buff are really nice because our dots really don't do any damage. They did nerf the Keeper of the Grove, so our burst is coming down a bit, so a little bit more of a sustained burst orientation. I'm definitely going to be trying out Elun's Chosen, which is what got really significant buffs for PvE, but it's also going to be PvP. This is a build I was playing at the start of the War Within before it got Giga nerfed out of the game. And this is like the Starfire hardcasting build. I'm definitely going to be giving this a go. 30% Wrath buff is nice, and it somewhat compensates for the loss of the Keeper of the Grove damage. Also, the Star Surge damage probably equals that out. Keeper of the Grove maybe ends up in a very similar spot or slightly weaker, whereas Elun's Chosen goes a little bit higher and we get a little bit more tankier. So just relative hero talent balance, and we get a little bit tankier. So I do think Boomkin can still be a really good performer. I'm going to put it onto A tier. As a result of those changes, I think with the proc Frenzied Regen heal, just the general bear farm, I actually wonder if Heart of the Wild becomes more of a viable option, as that increases our stamina and gives us more Frenzied Regen. Might be a good way as like surviving a lot of these big double melee burst openers is playing Heart of the Wild again. That could maybe be an option. It requires a little bit more expansion on it. Could be a little higher, maybe a little lower. I think it kind of would be unlikely to be a little lower, but somewhere in and around here I think is a fair spot for Boomkin. Discipline Priest, we talked about this, is the number one healer at the moment. Honestly, I don't even think it really got nerfed super hard. I think it got some nerfs for PvE. So a little bit less damage, 1% less damage reduction on Atonement. This didn't affect PvP. And then I think they nerfed like your burst healing on, I'm forgetting the name of the ability for it off the top of my head, Evangelism. I think maybe the mana regen nerf's probably going to be the biggest one. Also maybe the Forset bonus. Are probably going to be felt the most, but you basically never even came close to running out of mana. So this might just put you on to an even playing field. I really kind of don't feel like Disc is going to just like disappear from the game as a result of these changes. I really doubt it. I don't know if it'll be godlike anymore, but I'm going to honestly give it an S tier ranking still, because I think its mana is going to just be even now with every other healer. Its throughput is still remarkably good. It still has really good damage throughput. I think that it's still in a really good spot. It's got mostly damage mitigation cooldowns, which are great for solo shuffle dampening. I'm going to leave it still under the S tier ranking for now. Unholy DK, this is what I think that a lot of people were talking about, and I know I'm kind of jumping all around, and that's mostly just because I'm going based on like my anticipation for what the changes were to these specs. So their attempts here are to make a sand lane kind of like tank build for when you're running against warriors and windwalkers that typically kind of crush you, but they're also buffing Soul Reapers, which seems to be what Mez is mostly excited for, and it's going to give you that big execute power. So if Soul Reaper triggers below 35% health and crits, it might just kill the target. So giving you some lethality is something that you were lacking before. And maybe even as Frost, I don't know how easy it is to get Soul Reaper as Frost Death Knight versus Unholy and build variants with that regard. But I mean, if you got like a Frost Shatter off, if it's even possible, I don't know. It says Death Knight, so it makes it seem like you can get it for both. This could be really good. Unholy DK is probably honestly one of the harder ones. I'm going to give it a little bit more of a conservative ranking on A tier with those changes. I think the nice durability against these guys is great. Execute power, so you're more lethal on your own, is great. But I think you still do struggle with these classes. And with Rets getting buffed as much as they are too, like Ret Warriors have been historically one of the hardest things for you to deal with. BM Hunter and Feral Druid can be hard. That it still could be hard for you, but it's definitely improved a lot more from where it was previously. Assassination basically didn't see any changes, but I think it's still remarkably good. I'm going to be putting it on the S tier. It just does really good damage, has really strong execute power. You're never going to be able to, best kidney shot, just really good lockdown. I think the gouge change on this patch, so CC doesn't break anymore on damage. Like you can just gouge them with full bleeds and it kind of sits for a little bit. Really gives you an edge. I think Assassination is really good still, and we didn't see really like any changes for Rogue. They basically just stayed where they were. Ret Paladins got giga buffed. We saw buffs to Templar's Verdict damage. I think we saw buffs to survivability. Blinding Light no longer removes dots. It might even be a pseudo stun. So if you got like a lock on your team and you blind the whole team and their dots just ticking and it doesn't break or something, that could be crazy. So you're tankier. almost all of your abilities, your non crusade build as well got buffs. There might be some build variants. I think we're already starting to get into a much better spot with the bug fixes that they made as well to Herald. So for me, I think Ret is like at least A, if not maybe a bit higher, especially if it has enough damage to be able to kill Shadow Priests. That's the big question for me with Ret, because it was struggling with mages and Shadow Priests. If it can exceed that level where it's able to kill Shadow Priests and mages, it could go up here very quickly. That's the main difference in its capability to rise up the ranks. But I'll leave it on A tier for now. A more conservative ranking for it as far as this prediction is concerned. Windwalker, I think, could fall off pretty hard. I would have before put Windwalker on Godlike. They give you more healing on Celestial Conduit, which is a weird buff, but they're also nerfing your Slicing Winds damage and nerfing your Crackling damage, which I think could bring you down. And I do think you can struggle with uptime in a lot of situations. You're still really durable, though. I definitely think you're still an S tier class, like at least. You might even still be Godlike, to be honest. I'm gonna put it on S tier for now and leave it a little bit lower. I don't know which melee is gonna end up being the Godlike melee if it's not Windwalker, which is gonna be interesting when we get to that point to try and figure that one out. But I think that losing those little burst edge points, like even with the 4-set bonus, I don't think your sustain is comparable to Fury. Fury just absolute rampaging monster, behemoth berserker, just. I don't think it's going to be comparable to that. And remember, this tier list goes left to right, like what I think is strongest to weakest. So strongest to weakest, and separate them based on their role. Fire Mage, I think it's going to be noticeably weaker. They're nerfing the overpowered barriers, they're nerfing the cooldowns around your barriers, and they just nerfed your damage. So for solo shuffle, I think Fire Mage is probably going to feel a lot weaker. I'm going to put it down here, especially considering it's weak into Hunters, can be weak into Shadow Priest with Spam Purge. And Ellie's also got buffed. I think Fire Mage will probably feel at least noticeably weaker when it comes to shuffle. Arms Warrior, I was kind of trying to save this one because it's a really tough one to talk about because it's getting so many buffs that it's like I really don't know how it wouldn't be good, especially having literally just played against it last night. I just don't know how. 25% execute damage, 20% blade storm, 15% demolish. Like that's a lot. That is a lot. I would really struggle to see how Arms Warrior isn't, like, again, at least A tier, if not S. I'm going to slot it into A tier for now, but I really want to put it a bit higher. I think the main reason I'm leaving it on A tier is defense maybe still could be an issue for it. Fury seems to be more durable and sustained than Arms. I've seen lots of Arms Warriors just kind of die by the sword in a lot of cases. But Warriors will also excel more if Rets are more in the meta, if DKs are more in the meta, and Mages are going down and Shadow Priests are going up. So it could do better just based off meta, even regardless of its tankiness. But I think somewhere in A or above is definitely a safe prediction spot for it. Arcane Mage is getting a lot of nerfs and maybe getting nerfed almost the most of any spec in the game. They're nerfing your movement speed, nerfing damage and redistributing damage, nerfing all the barrier absorbs. And Arcane was looking really good. It was looking really good for a really long time. I think it definitely needed to get nerfed. But did it get nerfed too much, especially considering Ellie's got buffed, which has typically been a counter for you. Resto Shamans are already really good. Beast Mastery Hunters and Hunters in general are really popular right now, which can make it difficult. So I think Arcane, as far as solo shuffle, I'm going to put it down on A tier. Do I think it's the best of the A tier? It's probably close. It's somewhere in and around there. Again, if you're a new player, it's going to feel like D tier. If you're a really well-experienced player, you're going to be able to get more out of it. So it's one of those specs that you do need to take that into account as far as skill level and time experience on the class. But I think it's going to be disrupted really easily by Ellies that are probably going to pop up a lot, because when Ellie gets a lot of Giga buffs, people reroll a lot, and BM Hunter is already, I think, going to start taking a huge population jump, and Arcane struggles with those. So I think A is probably fair, if not maybe even possibly lower, because Mage typically in solo shuffle is not as good as other brackets, because you kind of just bring a rogue who puts you in your backpack and carries you in threes. But in solo shuffle, you don't have as much synergy. So I think it's another reason to be more fair with kind of bringing this down a little bit. Elemental Shaman or Devastation Evoker. Which one should we cover first? Let's talk about Frost Mage. Let's get all the mages out of the way here. So they are nerfing your barriers as well. It's all mage specs. They're also coming after the slippery slinging, reducing it by 50% effectiveness. So nerfs overall, I think your damage is a little bit easier to get off those Frost. It could just be a bit of a rock paper scissors thing where like you get a really good lobby as mage, right? Like you get all melee DPS, you're just running around circles laughing out and they can't hit anybody and you're winning the game for free. If you get all wizards and like dot class wizards, it can be really tough. to win on Frost. So it's kind of like a 50-50. I do think it's going to be better than Arcane just because it's easier to play. It's way easier to get more effective damage out. So I'm going to put it a little bit higher. I'll put it on to S tier. For now, I don't think it's godlike. I think you do have some counters. And again, with the 50-50 rock, paper, scissors nature, it can be hard to overcome those. But I think S tier is probably fair. Devastation Evoker is actually getting some buffs. And I'm just trying to remind myself exactly what those buffs were. But it's getting quite a lot, I think. As far as like reorienting its damage around its or buffing its set bonuses up in terms of power. They fixed some bug issues with it. It's gonna be really good into these melee DPS. It's always been really good into melee DPS. It's gonna have a lot of cleave and AoE damage, is what it looks like so far from these changes that I've seen here. Devastation Evoker, I mean, I think it honestly is better than Boomkin. Is it better than Affliction Warlock? I think this is fair. I think putting it on S tier is fair. I think that it does. It's really tanky. You just fly in, immune to snares, immune to kicks, spamming one button, melting everybody in front of you. It does really good overall damage. It can easily outdamage almost every caster in the game with such an easy rotation while you're immune to everything. I think it'll end up feeling really good in Shuffle. Elemental Shaman also, I think Elemental Shaman is likely going to get really strong. They buff just basically all of your abilities by 8% damage, I believe, and then some of them by even more than that. Primordial Wave is something that you're likely going to want to experiment with this 500% increase that they've given to it, but this 8% to everything else, and you're already really tanky. You still hold that, and that's one of the more valuable things in PvP is your level of durability. So, and they buff Tempest. So maybe Stormbringer Tempest is an option in double caster situations where you can free cast. Maybe just in general, man. Like if Tempest ends up really hitting hard. I think Ellie is probably jumping up a few tiers at least. I'm going to put it on the S tier. I think it's still like mostly instant cast. Obviously, you're playing Tempest, not as instant cast, but I think it's damage profile, its tankiness, and with all these melee getting buffed, and it's really good into these melee with the knockbacks that it has, and it's got a good synergy with warriors and things like that. That it'll feel really good here onto S tier. Now let's look at some healers. Let's talk about some healers for a little bit. So we got the Holy Priest. These guys got Giga Omega Giga Shenron buffed. Okay, like they got all these PvE buffs. So more mana regen, 8% healing on basically everything. Oh, those are the PvP changes, sorry. Mana regen and 8% healing on everything. And then they got a whole bunch of renew mechanics for PvE. So they're just getting a ton of healing from all of this. Lightwell 30%, renew increased by 10 billion between everything. Images, more damage. I mean, this is the type of change they need to do to try and get healer variety increase so that queue times are faster. People are able to form dungeon groups faster and not just feel like they only can bring one healer into the group. So I do think this is correct for them to focus on this, but it's just so much that it's really hard to tell. Everybody seems to think it's going to be replacing Discipline Priest, so like doing something like this would be super risky. I think in Shuffle, because you're focused mostly around healing throughput, which is countered by dampening, that you're maybe not going to feel completely godlike. I'm going to put you kind of on an even playing field with Disc as far as Shuffle, just because it's so much throughput that yeah, I mean, you're in the mana regen changes between the two, so that maybe you can run this priest out of mana in some cases to win later on. I think you're definitely looking a little bit more toe to toe, but I don't know if I'm feeling bold enough to put it on to Godlike. I feel like that's it's going to be a bit of a stretch. Havoc Demon Hunter, I don't think we really saw anything for Havoc, if my memory serves me right, but I'm pretty sure we didn't see anything for Havoc. It was already just in a good spot. Like you've got really good overall damage. You can still make good preemptive plays with pre-blur and pre-vengeful retreat. You got good synergy with a lot of the classes that are getting buffed here with DKs coming back up. You're just really good, well-rounded kit. I think Demon Hunter is like, again, at least A, if not S. It's getting hard, man, because like everything seems so good, and like I think everything just seems so good. I'm gonna put you like maybe below Assassination. Again, left to right means best to worst. A little bit lower than Assassination, but I think you're really well-rounded. And you really only struggle with like well-coordinated rogue teams, and it's hard to be a well-coordinated rogue team in Shuffle. Other than that, I think you can just mow down a lot of casters. You can train down some healers too. I've seen healers get trained down by Havoc Demon Hunters really effectively. So I think you're going to be a powerhouse. Marksmanship Hunter, again, it's kind of coin flippy. You get lobbies where you just get clothies and you're absolutely pounding and just destroying everything. And you can get other situations where you're not too useful. And, DK's got buffed, Warriors got buffed. There's probably going to be a lot more of those. Mages got nerfed, so Mages probably going to drop down. So you might get those negative matchups a little bit more. And they kind of counteracted a lot of the changes that came through here. So you're basically just about in the same spot that you were before. I think BM is better than Marksman. I'm going to put Marksman like somewhere in here with Boomy or something on A tier. I think it's just some lobbies you can be so oppressively strong, but other ones you can feel very weak. So you're kind of at the mercy of that a lot more than other classes in this instance, but you can still hit just really disgustingly hard. So in those cases, you can just win games regardless of those advantages or disadvantages in a lot of those cases. Mistweaver Monk is another one that got, I think, at least a little bit. I think it's a lot more than a little bit. It got like 25% healing on almost all of its abilities or something like that. 25% Vivified, 25% Enveloping, 40% Renewing Mist. Its mana regen got buffed. And its conduit healing got increased by 50%. So, I feel like Mistweaver Monk, again, you struggle, though, with matchups. You struggle with mages. You struggle with hunters. Hunters are still really good, and there's likely still going to be at least some mages. But if it's like Ellies and damage output classes with not a huge amount of CC and cleaves, you could do really well. So, like, Mistweaver, I'm going to put on A tier, but this is one that could be way higher. I think it's mostly just because of the countering nature of everything that it's going to feel a little bit harder in some situations than other healers. But the mana equalization of all the healers could also be a huge variable to really take into consideration when trying to predict something like this. Holy Paladin got giga buffed. It's getting tankier. It got more Eternal Flame healing. I think those are the two main ones. Divine Protection for Shield Wall. Also, Blinding Light not removing on dots is also a buff to Holy Paladin because you can run Blinding Light in a lot of lobbies. So you don't have to worry about that as far as positioning and avoiding things. And the main increase here, I think, was definitely, 3%, and then the Word of Glory or Eternal Flame. So more tanky, more Eternal Flame healing. You've got to at least be A tier, but I really think you could maybe even be fighting to take Discipline Priest spot here. I think the healer competitive variance is getting really close, which is really good. I think a lot of healers should be excited to try the changes out here on Tuesday. Enhancement Shaman, you're getting some buffs. So I think they did nerf some abilities. I misread them on my video, at least one of them. So now we're going to double check the thing that I misread to make sure that we're not talking about the wrong thing here. So yeah, Promoted Storm actually got reduced by 15%. I thought this was an increase because this is one of your hardest hitting abilities at the moment. So it got reduced. They really focused on buffing the Stormbringer build again, it looks like, with buffing Tempest and Storm Strike because that got giga nerfed moving into this patch. A lot of people like that one button build for enhancement. So that one button build is definitely receiving the most positive elements of all of these changes. Some of these will affect totemic like Ice Strike, but this Promoted Storm nerf is actually a nerf to the totemic build. So it's a little bit of an equalization. I think you're still going to kind of struggle with getting uptime. I'm going to give it a little bit of a lower ranking still. I think maybe they buffed your healing too, though. And I'm trying to figure out where exactly that is. They buffed your healing surge. Having used Maelstrom on it is kind of rough, though. And I can't remember if they buffed your healing stream in PvE. They might have buffed your healing stream in PvE, so I just want to take a look to make sure. No, that wasn't anything for PvE for enhancement. I think it's a little bit weaker, just because it's a little bit easier to control. You can get some lobbies. You can be an absolute mastermind with it and do really well with it. Still, this one I could bump up to A. It's probably somewhere in here. All the classes are getting really close with each other, which is good, right? If you want the game to be as close as possible. Destruction Warlock, I don't think got anything. And it slaps out really big chaos bolts. It slaps out really big chaos bolts right now. If you're able to cast, you can absolutely decimate people. I think it's mostly tankiness and your ability to deal with Fury Warriors at the moment that seems to be the most difficult. And Fury Warriors just still in a really good spot. Yeah, I don't think you literally got anything. So Destruction Warlock, I want to say it's at least A tier, maybe the best of the A tier for ranged DPS. It gets really big chaos bolts, but I think these classes are a little bit more durable or slippery to be able to finish, which gives them an edge over it in the current meta, especially given these pet classes and Fury Warrior power at the moment. So I think A tier is a fair spot at the moment for it. Demonology is actually really good, and I feel like I've been sleeping on this spec a lot. It's really disruptive. It actually has a lot of good sustained damage, can drag games on. I actually kind of feel like it's almost better than Affliction, at least in Shuffle sometimes. I think it might actually be the best lock spec. I know that sounds like, what? That's the best lock. I actually think this might be the best lock spec in Shuffle. So I'm going to be giving it a bit of a higher ranking. I'm going to give it an S tier ranking over the other lock specs. I think some of these guys really struggle with a lot of these specs, whereas Demo seems to have a bit of an easier time. I've seen a lot of demos in hunter lobbies and things like that where it actually is performing better. And I think it's just a lockdown for finishing power, which is a bit better than Affliction. especially with healing coming up, having some sort of CC effect or Mortal Strike in any sort of caster situations, I think could be really nice, because games should likely go longer because of the healing buffs that we're seeing to a lot of specs. I think Demo is actually a bit better, at least in Shuffle. Let's look here. What else do we have? Outlaw Rogue. They nerfed your tankiness. I think you're just an A tier. I think the kit of Rogue is never going to be bad enough that it ever really drops below A tier, but I think your throughput is quite low. So like somewhere in here with DK, I don't know if you're better or worse than Arms Warrior. Maybe we put you to the top of A tier. It's really tough to rank Rogue because its baseline kit is so good. But I do think you're probably going to feel weaker than the other Rogue specs with the tankiness nerf coming through your way, because it definitely going to even the field. This might be one of the first patches where Outlaw Rogue isn't just clearly the best Rogue spec. It's been a very long time since that happened. But I think you're probably still decent, at least, just because of how much CC you have as a class. Preservation Evoker, I've seen a lot of Prez mains really happy and excited to go and try Prez. I think they just buffed Spirit Bloom by like 20% or something like that. Increased all your throughput, increased some of your damage abilities like Disintegrate. I don't think they increased Living Flame though, because it would be just crazy amount of damage. And you get a little bit more mana back as well from some talents, just overall healing increase. I feel like Prez could feel really good. Honestly, the healers is the hardest one. I'm going to throw this onto S tier, I think. I feel like it's a lot of healing throughput. You're going to do a lot of damage, which is going to help you out. Maybe the lower end of the S tier. I'm going to take a risky gamble here and say Resto Shaman's the godlike healer. I think Resto Shaman is really good with its healing output. It's got a remarkable amount of instant healing. It didn't get touched at all. Still got really good mana regeneration relative to the other healers as well, because they're all getting shifted around. I think it's really good. I think the Unleash Riptide healing is really high. And I just double checking that I didn't get anything, but I'm pretty sure I didn't get anything. I'm going to leave Resto Shaman up here because I already said that it was up here before in the current tier list, and considering nothing happened. The only thing would be like meta, right? If it's Ret Paladin DKs and they're able to train you and actually kill you, then it can be risky, but it's also been a long time since trained the Shaman. It's usually only if Ret is that strong, train the Shaman ends up being good, because Ret can actually just kill them through their cooldowns when it's that strong. I'm going to leave it there as kind of the delineating healer, right, between the other specs that are currently available. Feral Druid, I still think is really good. They nerfed your Mortal Strike a bit, but you honestly kind of got a slap on the wrist for how good you are overall. And I just want to double check to make sure that was the only thing that wasn't nerfed. This Tireless Pursuit thing I think is very minor, if impactful whatsoever. This is, again, slightly reduced. So 4% more healing against Feral Druids. I feel like I need an S tier melee DPS, and I only have Survival Hunter, Sub Rogue, and Feral, and I don't know if it's Sub Rogue. So I feel like Feral Druid might be the best melee now, or close to the best melee. Maybe it's Assassin, maybe it's Fury Warrior. Maybe I should put Fury Warrior up on Godlike. I feel like Feral doesn't have the same types of issues that Fury has with mobility. Having Cyclone is great. I think it's still really durable. Definitely, out of all the specs up here, it's the only one that actually did get any sort of significant nerf. But it's very much so slap on the wrist. I think Feral is still kind of the king of Shuffle when it comes to melee. But maybe one of these guys pops up. I could see, DK maybe, Ret maybe, or Assassination Rogue kind of popping up and taking that spot. It's a prediction. I'm not expecting to be 100% correct on this. It's just what I'm anticipating, how I'm vibing with the current playthrough, and trying to inject these changes in my brain with a simulation running through my mind. And yes, I am AI, if you were wondering. But I'm going to leave it up there as like the delineating melee. Resto Druid, I don't think Resto Druid got very much. It was just frenzied regen. Yeah, your frenzied which in Shuffle, you get attacked, it's gonna make you a bit tankier. The auto regen proc, I think losing the Trank immunity was still pretty rough for Resto Druid. I have reservations about its power, especially if Prez ends up being really good. Like if Prez with Fire Breath Purge, all the pre-specs are really good with Purge. We've got Fire Breath Purge, Ellie Purge, Spell Steal, Hunter Purge, Shadow Priest Purge. I feel like if these are the specs I'm anticipating to be kind of, top performers, that I don't think it can be much better than A. If that, honestly, I think Holy Pally is a bit better, so I'm going to drag it down a little bit there. Crowd Control Avoidance, though, is much better than Mistweaver. It can still play max range, really just good overall sustained throughput. My experience on it has been biased because I'm playing in Boomkin gear, which I don't think is good with full haste. So as I'm able to get more mastery and try it personally, and I've played with a couple of Resto Druids, like I think I played with Sea-Doo last night. It definitely didn't feel terrible. So being a bit tankier is going to help. But yeah, I think somewhere in here is probably a more reasonable spot for expectation for it. Subtlety Rogue. I don't think there's any changes happening for Subtlety Rogue, but Subtlety Rogue is just really good in general. I swear it's just really good. There's a Rogue propagandist. I want you to think Subtlety Rogue is bad, but I think Subtlety Rogue is surpassing Outlaw Rogue, especially after the durability change. I think Subtlety Rogue is at like least S tier with Assassination. I don't know if it's better or worse. That's kind of like a hard ranking. Maybe we drag Windwalker down below Rogue. It's probably still a little bit higher than Rogue. Somewhere in here with Assassination Subtlety. They're definitely fighting for spec superiority at the moment. But yeah, Subtlety Rogue is a very good spec at the moment competitively. Frosty K, you got a 4% damage nerf, which is not going to feel good. Like you already weren't. I don't think you were like in an insane position. Like every once in a while, I see a Frosty K pop off. I feel like it's falling off. Maybe these changes, though. Again, I don't know how important Soul Reaper is for Frosty K, and maybe being more tanky in these melee lobbies, so you actually have time to like ramp up your cleave without just getting blasted out of the game, will help you out. I would doubt that you're worse than A tier, but again, like it's left to right, best to worst. You're still like second to bottom melee, even being on A tier. But I feel like you'll still feel competitive, and this is like where the game is going to be the most balanced, right? You'll still feel competitive, but I think like Fear Warriors and these guys are going to probably have a little bit of a better time, but it'll still be decent. Augmentation Evoker, I think, got like a 25% damage increase, or maybe it's 15% damage increase to all of its abilities. And yeah, the one shot from it, yeah, so just a 15% damage increase to all of its abilities. It has a big one shot. Like it could be viable. I'm going to leave it here. Maybe Fire Mage isn't that low if I'm going to put Aug there. I still think Fire is going to feel like the weakest caster, but Aug could honestly be a little bit stronger, I think, with his one-shot potential. And then Survival Hunter, I think you guys got just a little tiny buff overall with some like hero talent tree tweaks, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 4% buff. I don't know if these changes are enough to make Pack Leader viable over Sentinel. So this is a prediction where like I don't really know if I would feel qualified to 100% log this one in because I don't know how impactful Pack Leaders. I've been playing only Marksman and Beast Mastery, and when I tried Pack Leader, it felt much weaker than Sentinel as survival. So maybe it is though, like 40% on all this stuff, the cooldown reduction on all this stuff could make it feel good. And then I don't think there was any PvP specific changes for. There wasn't any PvP specific changes for survival. So survival is kind of hard. Is it B tier? Like I'm gonna put it on B tier, and this is mostly just because of how good Beast Mastery is relative to it, right? Like your ease of success on Beast Mastery is gonna feel just vastly better than playing survival. It's not that survival is completely unplayable, right? But yeah, I think it'll likely you'll feel the gap if you try both of these specs side by side with each other, and that's kind of my anticipation with the changes, is that these guys will feel like you're struggling a little bit more. Not that they're unviable, but you'll just feel like you're struggling a little bit more, having to work a little bit harder for your wins relative to these specs towards the top. Maybe Rogue you'll still always have to work because it's just a complicated class, but I think its likelihood to perform with the control it has relative to these melee is definitely a lot higher. But those are my thoughts. And you can see like things are starting to bubble up right towards the top. And remember to delineate this tier list from top to bottom, left to right. So like BM's the best, Shadow's the second best range, Frail's the best melee, Resto's the best healer, right? Frost Mage is third best range. It goes left to right, down, and it goes up and down. So remember that when you're ranking this. It doesn't mean that I think Arms Warrior is equal to Rep Paladin. I actually think Arms Warrior might be a bit better than Rep Paladin. Maybe Outlaw Rogue should move. Maybe Outlaw Rogue should move a little bit because Warrior I think is going to absolutely destroy people with damage output with the changes that are coming through for it. But those are my thoughts on it now. You guys wanted this as a prediction. It'll be fun to play on Tuesday and then go back and look at this and see how wrong or right we were with anticipating this and with the meta and in regards to that. It's always fun to do it, so we'll be doing that for sure. So thank you guys very much for watching the video. Hope you guys enjoyed the discussion, and I will see you in the next one.